this is not the video that I thought I would be making. Right, this moment. I thought I was going to be reading the first chapter of this book to you, Skyborn by David Dalglish. But, I finished this book, and oddly enough, it wasn't because I was on my trip. I got through, like, the first half very, very easily, on my work trip, which was great, but I came back, it's Friday, so I came back yesterday, Thursday, the 28th, because Friday's the 29th, I guess technically it's Saturday right now, because it's past midnight, so that's why it's showing me November 30th, but anyway, I finished this book today, like from page maybe no, I did read this. What the hell? Oh, okay. So, I went from chapter 16, which is page 197, to page, including the epilogue, 495. So, it was far more than half the book that I read today. This is the quickest I have ever read something, by far. Half of it was out of a desire to finish it, for sure. But, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about the backstory of this book with me. I think I might have told a little bit of this when I did, like, my this or that book video. But, essentially, way back when I was in university, like out of high school, I should say, like this was actually, honestly, this was probably when like just after I graduated from grade 12 or something like that, and I was going into first year of university. I think that's close to, or like it could pause, or no, because when did I read The Autumn Republic? Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. I would have bought this in my grade 12 year. Whether or not it was after I graduated, not quite sure. But, oh, right, because I had the Natural History of Dragons going into university. But I was also reading maybe I finished The Autumn Republic. I probably bought this in between, sorry, as I do mental math on camera. But I probably purchased this from grade 11 going into grade 12, I would say, because I had started on an obsession with Orbit publishing. I find that Orbit does a decent job with their fantasy authors. I don't necessarily think that these are the kind of like BookTok, BookTube kind of like viral hit style books, but they are solid fantasy. I think that Orbit has a roster of very competent fantasy authors on their sort of like, well, they have a very on their roster. I literally just said it. Same thing goes for Tor, T-O-R, I think Tor also has a pretty solid roster of authors. But anyway, this was kind of my way of tiding myself over between stopped. I sort of started on something like a book a month kind of thing. I had Red, White, and Royal Blue, Nimona, and Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. Sorry, I am looking. The reason why I'm looking up is because I'm looking at my bookshelf. You can actually see it right here. That's where I keep all my favorite books, on this top shelf here of my bookshelf. Yeah, and then all the TJ Klune books. But anyway, this being beside the point, in 2020 I started reading in earnest, and it was always kind of like a personal project of mine to finish this book and like sort of acquaint myself, because I was familiar-ish with the general idea, like they're twins and they will eventually fly and all that kind of stuff. But I never really got to like the point of being fully immersed in it. And this is going to be, of course, my review, so spoilers. I would actually, a spoiler-free review, I would recommend this if you are a fan of pulpy fantasy that is just kind of like fantastical. It is quite gritty. This book does not shy away from death and I would say like light amounts of gore. Like there are descriptions of somebody getting slashed with a sword and what happens after that. It does not shy away from death. A lot of characters die in this book, which I was not expecting for the ever so slightly more youthful and light tone. Sometimes the deaths can feel not out of place, but this is also happening to teenagers, which is, it's not YA. If it is, I would be shocked. If it was intended to be YA, I would be shocked. But there is a kind of tone there is a younger tone being employed here, and the fact that there are a couple of deaths in here that are like, holy fuck, like someone just fucking. So it's maybe got a couple of, if you're a person who does not like sort of grim reality hitting somewhat out of the blue, maybe not the pick for you. And it's very fast moving, especially when you get to the back half of the book. It is like shit's moving, like stuff is going really fast. And it's also like, it's very well written combat, I would say. The few times there are combat in the book, it's very well written. I would also say maybe slight trigger warning in terms of like this is kind of getting into spoiler territory, although you kind of expect it when you read the back of the book. The two main characters, who, may I remind you, are teenagers, do kill a good amount of people. Like Brianna Skyborn, by the end of the novel, has a, like, I would put it a body count over 10 in like the killing way, not in like the, and then her brother Kale also ends up with a body count of, I believe, say like 3 to 5 or so. Main characters die, not like protagonist characters, but like there is one death in this book that I did not see coming. And then there are 2 more that I also did not see coming. And one scene where there's an execution that's happening that gets quite graphic to the point where I felt slightly uncomfortable in my body. But I generally am able to handle those things. I just get a little bit queasy. Hell Followed With Us is definitely like my threshold for like, that's as far as I'll take it. So this book does not kind of get to that level, but there's one point where it gets close. But anyway, we're gonna get into spoilers. The biggest thing that I enjoyed about this book is the world building is there is a very competent mystery that is set up in this world. At first, I did not have a ton of hope for it, but kind of by the time that there's this sort of conspiracy thing that's going on, then I really get into the world building. The villain twist is quite easy to see coming pretty early into the book, but I really wouldn't even call it much of a twist, honestly, because I think it's sort of an inevitability, and most characters treat it as such. And Brianna and Kale, the two main characters, the two protagonist characters, who are also the point of view characters, because you are coming from their point of view, you are very much seeing this world through a 16, 17-year-old's eyes, and then these sort of harsh realities that become apparent are kind of, you get that sort of experience of maturing within this world alongside the protagonist characters, which I think is interesting. The magic is really cool. I would like to have explored it a tiny bit more, but I think that they're saving, David Dalglish is saving that for, of course, books 2, and is there a book 3? I think there might be a book 3. I need to look into it. But I know that the series is finished at this point. But like I said, I would like the magic system to have maybe gotten a little bit more fleshing out, but really, honestly, it's not much of a complaint because this book does a fantastic job of doing a lot of showing, and I feel like the magic system without that showing would have required a lot of telling, and I'm just happy that we got shown it. And it leaves me wanting more in a good way, and not in like a, oh well, it's all just a mystery. No, you get a good amount of like, oh, I wonder how this magic works, I wonder how this is created, and all that kind of stuff. Same thing goes with the floating islands. I think that is a mystery that is definitely something that I want to find out more about, and like the history of this world, because the history is very much taught in one way, but the history is very likely not that way, because there's a lot of censorship and control of information going on in this world, as you come to figure out, which I think is done very competently. I think it's done very good to where you're not frustrated with the world building, but you're kind of like, there's something more here, but I don't know what it is. It's, I would say, very much the authentic experience of a teenager living in a system that they have known their entire lives, and then becoming kind of wise to a few things as they are thrust into a situation that causes them to rapidly mature. I think that is probably one of the most masterfully done parts of this book, that sort of like slow maturing kind of vibe that you get from the characters. Yeah, I would say with this relatively light spoiler version, pick it up if you're a fan of fantasy. I see no problem in it, and the nice thing is that you could probably read through this book, and if you don't like it, you're not going to be upset with the time that you spent with it, because like I said, the back half of the book really is in this novel. I would say the supporting cast is all done generally very well. The antagonist is really not there much at all, but you kind of find out why as things go on. Because there's like this sort of like proxy war kind of thing that goes on between the major floating islands, and then like the governing island of them all kind of is the puppet master, I guess you could say, and that of course takes will need a lot more exploring in the next couple novels, in the next novel for sure, but it's really interesting to watch like these side characters interact with the protagonist characters. Now, the protagonist characters, Gale Skyborn, who is the brother of the pair, I'd say is my favorite character. A lot more down to earth than Brianna is. And I'm not just talking about like insensibility. Gale is fairly even keel, has got kind of a reservedness but a cheekiness to him that I really enjoy. Kind of is the beating heart of the novel, really is the grounded perspective. And then Brianna is a lot. I would say that for me, Brianna is the weaker of the two siblings, and quite honestly is probably the weakest of all of the characters, just because like the supporting cast gets the development that they require, and because they are a supporting cast, they don't get the amount of development that literally a point of view protagonist for half of the book would get. And honestly, I think that does Brianna a disservice, because on the surface of everything, Brianna is a hothead who rushes into things, is the literal definition of act before thinking, and is very emotional. Now, I would say that this emotional hinges, it just swings slightly into the unstable category. And I can see why that decision was made. I absolutely can. The only thing is that this girl is joining the military, and I think some of the adults in her life give her a little bit too much credit. But I will also say that, okay, full spoilers now, starting of like actual plot points in the book that you shouldn't be hearing before you read it. It is sort of revealed and hinted at that Brianna's continued presence at the Seraphim Academy is engineered by the sort of central island and this group of people called the Theotechs, who kind of handle and sort of lord, they monopolize the power of what makes the wings fly, what makes the people able to cast magic. They keep that close to the chest so that they can control all of these sort of minor islands. It is revealed-ish that the Theotechs are intentionally trying to railroad Brianna and Gale into becoming Seraphim. So, I give David Dalglish a pass on this. Brianna is abrasive at times, cool at others, and sometimes kind of annoying. And I realize that she is a 16 to 17. They spend a year at this academy over the course of the book, so naturally they would have had a birthday at some point. They just don't mention it. But it is likely kind of accurate, which I think is very interesting, that normally what I would find as a weakness in the character writing actually plays into her characterization, which I think is very smart. The only thing is that if I didn't have Kale in the book, I would probably fucking hate Brianna. Again, that's maybe a little bit intentional, but Kale really kind of reins her in every now and again, and honestly, it was so perfectly balanced out that it was like, okay, I enjoy that this is a Kale chapter. And then when I got to a Brianna chapter, it was like, you know what? I got this. I can do it. There is maybe just ever so slightly a harping on a slight repetition of this, like, I'm not worthy, I'm never gonna live this down, the images of all of the people who have died play in her brain, and there is a lot of that. It doesn't get to the point of, like, Curious Tides by Pascal Lassalle that I reviewed earlier in the fall, but if there was any more of it, I would probably have gotten slightly annoyed, to the point where it would have knocked down like a half-star point off of my rating, which I don't necessarily do ratings, but you know. But I think that by the end of the book, they have their most poignant version of this. Like, actually, I'm just gonna pull it up here. Okay, so Brianna says, everyone's confused. The world we know has changed forever, and we don't even know why or whom to blame. But no matter what happens, I do know this, Bree. I know you did all you could to save those people. You don't know that, she said. I feel it in my bones. I know I didn't do as much as I could have. Not like you, not like everyone else. There is a lot of that. Like, I didn't do enough. I could have done enough. I'm never going to forgive myself. Which, I believe that a 17 or a 16-year-old girl would likely have that reaction, given the fact that she literally watched one of the floating islands that is home to thousands of people crash into the ocean firsthand. Traumatizing. But there's also, okay, for example, her love interest gets run through with a sword 5 feet in front of her. That is the character death that I was like, what the fuck? Like, where did that come from? I honestly think it's not cheap. It's not cheap shock value. It is truthfully a subversion of expectations. Honestly, as soon as he was a love interest, I was like, you know what? He's sticking around. He's teaching Brianna how to use the swords. Turns out the swords become very central to her character development. And I was like, well, you know what? Her love interest, Dean, is just probably gonna stay around, and he's got this duel with another guy from another island, so he's probably gonna, like, pull it off in the end. No, he gets fucking destroyed in the duel, and like I said, run through with a sword right in front of Brianna. And then there is another moment where, okay, so basically Brianna and Kale have gone to take a test that most, if not all, that's not made very clear, but most teenagers, like I said, if not all teenagers, have to do, where they test if they have affinity for a certain element: earth, lightning, fire, water, or light. Light is what powers the wings. And so they get tested. They figure out, okay, Kale has an affinity for light, which should make him essentially a taxi driver. But then those Theotechs step in and they kind of rig it so that, nope, he actually has water as his affinity, which manifests as ice. And then Brianna, they figure figure out that she has fire affinity. So then, if you have strong enough affinity, you go to an academy on your island that teaches you how to be a seraphim, which is a warrior who flies around, uses the whatever element they have as their affinity to fight and basically cast spells and sling spears of ice and fireballs and whatever, giant boulders and stuff at each other, and then use their swords if need be. So they're at this academy, and they are in a group of, I think it was 19, and they have to do flight training to learn how to fly with these wings, because these wings are actually something they control. It's not just I cast fly and then I can just move around. It's an actual skill that you have to learn. It's piloting yourself basically using this light element. And during a flight drill, two students in their freshman class, their year 1 class, collide in midair and just fucking die. Brianna saves one of the people, kind of her best friend at the academy, pulls her out of the way in time to save her from being the third one killed in this collision. But the other two students just beef it. And again, Brianna has this moment of I could have saved more. I can't believe I did this. I'm never going to be able to save them all, which is perfectly fine character development. I'm okay with it. I can survive it. I truly can, because this book is just good enough that I can overlook it, for sure, in no uncertain terms. But there is a slight repetition of that motif, which again is part of her character development, and I honestly think that it's something that would probably get better with book 2, where it's we see this very sort of moralistic black and white convictions of a teenager being molded and shaped by the fact that she, by the end of the novel, is flying through fields of people and cleaving them, sometimes in two with flaming swords. Traumatizing. Anyway. But that is kind of I would say my biggest complaint, where I like Kale, Brianna. And then the supporting cast I really like. The magic system, really cool. Like I said, kind of piggybacking off into the magic system. Also, very fun, very interesting, quite unique. There are these prisms that are essentially a resource that contain sort of elemental power that are doled out by the center island, which is the control manipulation island. But we don't find that out until very much later. But there are definitely shades of that throughout the book. To, like I said, to the point where it isn't necessarily a twist, but it is kind of oh wow, okay, I guess they are actually evil by the end of the book. And it's just very cool. Magic is a limited resource. Magic is a very important resource. And you kind of have to train it up. The sword play, I think, is very well written. The combat is very well written. It is the kind of combat that could get very bogged down in just it's a chaotic mess, but I think it is very competently communicated how to make sense of that chaotic mess, if that makes sense. The world building, like I said, is good. Maybe a little bit light, but I think really good for a first entry. You know what you have to know, and that will get built upon later, which I'm happy about. Like I said, I think that this series will really hit a stride in the second book stage, because this sets up a lot of good stuff for the second book, and this really keeps the sort of drama and the conflict zoomed in, rather than a big picture kind of conflict between islands and a civil war and all that kind of stuff. The final twist, where one of the islands so Brianna and Kale Kale are from the island of Weshern, and the island of Galen is kind of the bad guy island that's invading Weshern, because Brianna, after her boyfriend gets killed in a duel, she puts on her boyfriend's gear, grabs his sword, and runs through the guy who killed him. Her first kill is literally like her flying after him and like burning him alive, and then also running him through with a sword, and then plummeting down to the ground on top of his body because he's no longer able to control his wings, and then like jamming a sword through his chest. Traumatizing. And so anyway, this kind of sparks a greater conflict between the two islands. Galen literally crashes into the sea and thousands of people die. David Dalglish does not pull punches at all. It's really cool. There is like this sort of behind the scenes like conspiracy kind of plot line where like there's a prophet that's speaking out against the Central Island, and the Central Island is trying to keep a lid on that, but of course you're like, oh, there's probably some truth in this, but it does give me the kind of vibe of like it's probably going to be like President Coin from Hunger Games, where like she maybe doesn't have the best sort of morals either, but of course I'll have to see. Yeah, I would say a very competent novel, something that if you like fantasy is not necessarily a quick read. It's 424 pages, but it is definitely like a read that you can kind of like, okay, I got it, and you can get through the back half quite quickly, especially if you're a fast reader. It's very fast paced, a lot is happening. It's really good that way. The lore, I think, is interesting if you're a big lore person. The other thing that I really enjoy is this book is essentially one big academy plot line, where if we're kind of going for like tropes, which I don't like, it's not that I don't like tropes, they're useful, but I think there's an overemphasis of them in the sort of publishing world these days because of things like Book Talk. This is a call out of Book Talk. No shade if you love Book Talk, though. I have my own opinions about it, but I do generally enjoy it to an extent. But this book, I don't think, goes for the cliched academy plotline. There is a rival kind of group of students, but it really doesn't pan out into much. It just becomes kind of like the world is too serious to have like a, you're a doofus, hey dork face. Like, it's not that kind of thing. It's more sort of like I'm gonna insult you and your entire family, and then later in the book I'm gonna kidnap you at knife point. I'm gonna, like, the rival group of students literally kidnaps Brianna and Kale at knife point. And then the rival group of students, one of them gets crushed to death by a boulder. One of them gets his head speared through with an icicle. It's fucking brutal. It's wild. So yeah, those are also some character deaths that you're like, holy shit, that's a lot. But like I said, this academy plotline I think is really well done. We actually get like class. We get to see what their training looks like. We get to see their ethos behind it. But it doesn't get bogged down in like, oh well, this is the canned, we're at a magic school kind of plotline, which I really enjoy. It doesn't linger too much, and I also do think that it moves itself along to a point where we get to see the interesting parts of like magic school. necessarily the parts of it that I sometimes don't enjoy in media. So, if I were to give a star rating, I like doing it out of 100, which is maybe a bit bad, but like I find 5 stars, like I could really like something for some reason, but not the other, and then I just give it a 3.5, but a 3.5 is literally a 50%, which feels wrong. But then if I say like, well, I give this a 3.8, it's like, but so anyway, that's my way of saying I just use a scale of 100. If this book, let's see, okay, I reviewed The Spear Cuts Through Water this year, and if I didn't already, I think that would be the closest to 100% that I could probably ever get, to the point where I would probably just say it's a 100% for sure. Record of a Spaceborne View, again, probably 100% by Becky Chambers, and then Spear Cut Through Water is Simon Jimenez, both of which I reviewed on the channel. If Curious Tides by Pascal Lascelles is the worst crime it commits is being painfully boring, so I'd probably go like 45%. Just to kind of give you like, those are a couple benchmarks. This, I would say, receives a solid 75 to 80, I would say. The back half definitely earns it that 80. It's maybe a little bit slow to start. And then, like I said, there are a couple of annoyances with Brianna's character, so that probably is what earns it the 75. But I would say that the time that I spent with this book in that one day, like the Friday today evening that I finished it in, I would say like that part of it earns it the 80%, I would say. So I would say pick it up. It's fun, it's cute, it's well, no, it's not cute, it's like it's brutal, but it manages to keep it light. I don't know. It really does. I would say high fantasy for sure, high concept fantasy. I would say, like, we're not doing elves and fairies and things like that. We're definitely doing like hard fantasy. Yeah, I would say I quite like it. Next book on the docket is not bookshops and bone dust. I'm kind of right now in this like fast moving, I want more fantasy kind of mood. So I'm going to read Dragons of Deceit, a Dungeons and Dragons novel. A Dungeons and Dragons novel, classic Dragonlance, it says up at the top, by Margaret Weiss, or Margaret Weiss, W-E-I-S, and Tracy Hickman, Ooh, that's good tapping. Fuck, that's good tapping. That's really good. I like that. I just picked this up at Indigo, like last week, basically. Really good, really excited. It says, Destina Rosethorn, as her name implies, believes herself to be a favorite child of destiny. But when her father dies in the War of the Lands, she watches her carefully constructed world come crashing down. She loses not only her beloved father, but also the legacy he has left her, the family lands and castle. To save her father, she hatches a bold plan to go back in time and prevent his death. First, she has to secure the device of time journeying, last known to be in the possession of the spirited Kender Tasselhoff Burfoot. But to change time, she needs another magical artifact, the most powerful and dangerous artifact ever created. Destina's quest takes her from the dwarven kingdom of Thorbarden said, my goal is kind